Them new tracks. Whatever made it.
You maggot! Pity I have to kill you. You would make a strong slave.
Shadow of Mordor is one of those oddball games for me. I watched a friend play it and thought it looked pretty neat. But really, I'm not a big fan of open world games. It looked like an Assassin's Creed ripoff, and it's based off Lord of the Rings, which I have no interest in. So by all means, this game should not be for me. But I heard some good things about it, and I got it for 15 bucks, so I figured what the hell. And it turned out to be a lot of fun, although really simple.
You maggot! I'll flood the ground with your blood in Sauron's name!
Shadow of Mordor tells the story of Talion, captain of the Rangers of the Black Gate, who stand guard on the border wall against the country of Mordor, filled with orcs, criminals, monsters, and uruks, which are literally just stronger orcs and make up the vast majority of the enemies in this game. One day, the wall is attacked by the Black Hand, who seeks to revive his Dark Master, Sauron, back to a position of great power. In order to do this, a ritual must be carried out in which a strong soldier watches on, as his wife and son are murdered before his eyes before being killed himself. In doing so, Talion is now cursed never to die, and he has joined with an old ghost of another age that gives him some neat superpowers.
On ground, stomping across the slave fields.
Talion now seeks revenge on the Black Hand, as well as to learn of the motivations behind his actions. Coming from someone who's not a big fan of Middle-earth, I found the story pretty enjoyable. This is mostly because of the great writing and voice acting that helped engross me in the characters. Even the little story bits attached to trinkets scattered throughout the game are well acted and cool to experience.
The first messengers have rolled into camp. They're reporting few casualties. We've struck a mighty blow against the forces of Mordor aligned against us. Let it be so, and not fools' idle chatter. Haggadorn, what news?
They say we've won a monumental victory! You'll not be needing all that Athelis you've been grinding, my friend. Few need healing on this day. And more's the wonder. They say the Golden King has brought back a prize. Sauron himself, wearing the heavy chains!
The in-game animations are a bit below average, and I've seen better looking graphics elsewhere. Pre-rendered cutscenes look really good, but that should be expected. The main goal of Shadow of Mordor is to kill the 5 war chiefs scattered across the land, and in doing so, this will draw out the Black Hand.
So the local war chiefs did nothing to prevent this sacrilege?
Allowing Talion to exact his revenge. You can seek out the war chiefs pretty much right away after doing a few missions. However, they'll show up alongside some captains which act as their bodyguards, and it can make fighting them all at once more difficult. It's still possible by all means, but it can be more trouble than it's worth. The player is better off finding the individual captains alone and taking them out before tackling the war chief. Each captain and war chief also has a set of strengths and weaknesses to take into account. Open combat won't do you much good against an enemy who can block your every blow, but one well-aimed arrow to the skull will be enough to put him down. There's a surprising amount of strengths and weaknesses that require the player to change their tactics depending on the situation at hand. One of my favorites was a war chief that was immune to all forms of conventional damage, but has severe weaknesses against environmental dangers. Some of these strengths can be a little overwhelming, like a combination of deadly strength along with poison, which can kill you in 1 or 2 hits. But overall, it works out pretty well. Upon killing a captain or war chief, they'll drop a random rune that can be used to customize your equipment with things like restoring health or dealing more damage through the use of certain actions. Most of them are really weak, but some of them are suitably effective. The Game of the Year edition comes with a set of completely broken runes. I highly recommend against using these your first time through, as they ruin the balance of the game, but they're fine to use after you've already beaten the game. The War Chief mechanic of rising through the ranks and killing each captain on the way up is a cool way to allow players to take it slow if they're not confident, while allowing more experienced players to skip straight to the end. And it all happens naturally in-game. There are very few arbitrary missions that have nothing to do with the War Chief, and those missions mostly explore the past of the Wraith who's hanging out with Talion. For the most part, there are the War Chiefs, there are the captains, go find them, go kill them. That's about all there is to it. This mission structure and pacing of the game as a whole is definitely Shadow of Mordor's greatest strength. I always felt like I had a lot of freedom in where to go and in which objective to take on next, and I never got bored until the later half of the game when things finally started to feel a little bit repetitive. And then the ending kind of comes out of nowhere and sets itself up for a sequel. Until then though, it's a damn fun ride. Combat is very similar to the Batman Arkham games. All you do is mash the square button until you see the triangle button, and then you go back to mashing square again. Once your combo meter reaches 8, you can pull off a special move to instantly kill an enemy. It's really simplistic and easy to get a grasp on, even when you appear to be hopelessly surrounded. But cutting off an Uruk's head never gets old. Later on, different enemy types which require varying tactics are introduced, and this helps a lot in mixing up combat. This does get pretty aggravating if a certain combination of enemies show up, like if you're facing nothing but a group of berserkers and facing them directly doesn't work. However, it never gets so bad that it's frustrating, and there's usually a solution for every obstacle. Stealth is fun due to how flexible it is to traverse the environment and how large a lot of the maps are, but it's also extremely easy. You can oftentimes walk right in front of a group of enemies and they won't really notice you. Likewise, you can charge an enemy right from the front and perform a stealth kill to his face. If he has a friend nearby, you can usually kill him quickly enough before he has time to raise an alarm. And if there's a larger group you have to deal with, they're usually hanging around a campfire or a barrel of grog, both of which can be shot with an arrow to make it explode and kill all of them at once. It's less about observing enemy patrols, which they don't seem to have anyway, and more so about utilizing the environment and the situation to your advantage. In the rare scenario where there isn't an easy solution and the enemy can't simply be skipped over, then open combat typically works well enough. The automatic nature of traversal in this game means that everything from every angle appears to be climbable, and that's not always the case. For the vast majority of the game though, traversal isn't really a big deal, and for how large the maps are, Talion moves quickly enough so that getting from point A to point B is never a struggle. The convenient fast travel options and impressive load times also helps ensure that the player never feels weighed down by the size of the map that they have to explore. In this way, the flaws of Shadow of Mordor are covered up with some duct tape. They're still there, but the game is going to run just fine. It's decent, it's passable, but it's not challenging, especially with Batman senses that allow you to see through walls at any time and follow footsteps to your next objective. Halfway through the game, the branding mechanic is introduced. By performing a brand, an enemy is brainwashed into serving you. This essentially replaces kills in every manner, since there's no time limit on how long a brand lasts, nor is there a limit on how many enemies you can have branded at once. And you give up nothing for choosing to brand rather than to kill. Combat was easy before, but now it's even easier. There definitely should have been some kind of limitation on branding, like if it cost double the amount of combo meter, or if it had a separate charge or something. You can also brand captains and war chiefs, which is more difficult, and in doing so you also give up the opportunity for a rune to customize your weapons. By the time you reach this point in the game though, you probably have all the runes you're going to care about anyway. And having a branded captain or war chief is a powerful option to have whenever they fight alongside you. There was some DLC released for Shadow of Mordor, which is included for free in the Game of the Year edition. The Lord of the Hunt presents a new set of missions to take on, with an emphasis on mounting monsters, which saw relatively limited use in the main story. The Bright Lord also presents a new set of missions, as well as some gameplay alterations, such as occasionally using the One Ring as an ultimate super move. These alternate game modes are pretty great, but it's important to note that they use the same maps and, for the most part, the same enemies as the base game. If you really enjoyed Shadow of Mordor and you want more, then the DLC is mostly worth it. Just keep in mind that, for the most part, it's more of the same. The additional mode that really caught my eye was the Trials of War. Once again, it's mostly the same as the main game, but a score is now kept based on performance. The game is pretty easy, sure, but how quickly can it be completed? In the interest of speed, it might be best to take on a fully guarded war chief. But of course that comes with its own dangers, as having to die and respawn will eat up a ton of time. The average time it takes to finish a higher difficulty trial shouldn't take more than an hour, which makes it great for something you can start and finish quickly. Recommending Shadow of Mordor is a tough call. It's a satisfying game, but not one with a whole lot of depth, although it is fairly long. I really took my time completing most of the optional content and exploring the world, and I finished it at just under 30 hours, but that doesn't include any of the DLC content, which I hardly spent any time in. So there's a good amount of meat here for those who enjoy the game and want more out of it. I'm sure that Lord of the Rings fans will get a kick out of what appears to be a faithful representation of the world, while fans of the Assassin's Creed and the recent Batman games will no doubt appreciate a new way to play those kinds of games. For everyone else though, it's average and not much more than that. But if you can get it for cheap like I did, then it's definitely worth playing through.
Fight me blade to blade!
Someone's sneaking.
Mad swine! Show me what you got, little talk. Let's make this fun! Bollocks to this! I will have more revenge next time!
Thank you for watching my review of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe.